This is my review of the new Duran Duran album, Future Past. Um, First of all, I thought it was really good. Um, Duran Duran is most known for their '80s music, and they had a number of hits in the '90s and um, one or two hits in the 2000s. Um, but Duran Duran really put it together and made a really great album, Future Past, which sounds the same as the Dua Lipa album, Future Nostalgia. The title sounds the same, and the music sounds the same too. I don't know if like if Duran Duran is trying to copy Dua Lipa or whatever. No, but Duran Duran sounds like themselves. Honestly, they sound like themselves, and they sound like they're progressing forward in a healthy way. Um, I've kind of had mixed feelings about Duran Duran overall. I mean, they're historically uh, they're obviously a classic '80s band, and I'm a huge '80s music aficionado. Um, but they uh, but they were one of my lesser favorite '80s music. Like I would always listen to the '80s stations growing up, and they would play a Duran Duran song, and I'd roll my eyes, and I'd be like, "Oh, here's another Duran Duran song." I'd be like, "Oh, here we go again," and I would always prefer the other '80s music over Duran Duran. I always thought of Duran Duran as I always thought of it like Video Killed the Radio Star. I know that's the Buggles, but I feel like it's really about Duran Duran. Video Killed the Radio Star. They were the real Video Killed the Radio Star. Like they were, to me, they were always more like about the look. I mean, I think they were more popular because of their look, how attractive they are, their persona, the cool music videos, more than it was their actual music. I know they're teen idols and they had adoring fans. And it was the dawn of MTV. They were at the very peak at the dawn of MTV, and then they declined a little bit after that. Um, I think that's a fair analysis, but I also think it's fair to say their music is really good. And my other problem with their music is like I consider it like gas station music. Like every time I'm in a gas station, I hear the same songs over and over again. Or I go to a grocery store, the same songs over and over again. Go to a restaurant, the same songs over and over again. I just call all that music gas station music because whoever's choosing the music for these local establishments, it's always the same. It's always the same music over and over again. So every time I go somewhere, I hear "Hungry Like the Wolf," "Hungry Like the Wolf," or "Her name is Rio and she dances on the sand," and I hear the same songs over and over again from Duran Duran and other musicians too. Like you hear other musicians play that same stuff on the I call it gas station music. Because you always hear it at the gas station. You never actually want to play that music, but at the same time, if that wasn't so overplayed, I would play it on my playlist. I would play Duran Duran more if they weren't so overplayed. If I didn't hear them all the time played like there's some like genius. They're not geniuses. They're good. Okay, they're good, but they're not geniuses. They're not like Sting. Sting's a genius. Duran Duran's not a genius. Um, like New Order's geniuses. Orchestral maneuvers in the dark are geniuses. Pet Shop Boys are geniuses. Erasure is geniuses. Depeche Mode is geniuses. Are geniuses. Depeche Mode are geniuses, but Duran Duran are not geniuses. Keep that in mind. You might disagree with me. I think their music videos push them over the top more than their actual songs. They're very good, though. Granted, they're very good. So there is that. Um, so the new album, Future Past, is actually, to be honest, if I'm being honest, it sounds better than their original stuff. It sounds better than anything I've ever heard from them. They sound better than they've ever been, and they've always been really good. I'm not saying they're bad. They're ever bad. I'm saying they're overplayed. That's it. But they're always really good. Obviously, they're much better than the average person can play music. But they're really diving into their synth pop personality and the way they play their guitars. Are they figured out how to play their guitars in a way that sounds like '80s. Like I don't know what the special effect is or what tactic they use to play the guitars. I don't know anything about guitars honestly, but I know more about synthesizers, but not that I know how to play synthesizers, but I the point is the way they play their guitars sounds like the way you hear guitars in the 80s. I don't know how they did that on this album, but I hear other indie artists do that too, who try to mimic 80s music and to good effect. But it's interesting to hear like how Howard Jones kind of does the same thing as far as Howard Jones figured out recently. Well, yeah, in the past 10 years, past 8 years, he figured out how to make 80s music today, current 80s music, and there are people who figured that out. New, well, I think New Order had a member of their band die, so I don't think New Order can do that. A lot of these bands, like Tears for Fears, just they're like too old. They don't record. Tears for Fears doesn't record any new music, so they don't even try, even though like they were the biggest of anyone. But Depeche Mode and Erasure know how to make '80s music today as well. So a lot of bands know how to do it. But I'm just glad to see Duran Duran figured it out. I actually haven't listened to their other albums from the 2010s. I've never heard them advertised. I heard an advertisement on Spotify that that showed me this album. That they're like, hey, check out Duran Duran album, and they're playing synth pop. See, a lot of these '80s bands, like what Sting is doing now? Sting is playing rock. He's playing rock music. Now, granted, Sting is good at rock music. He's good at the Police are great. I like Sting even better when he was playing with the jazz sound he had in the late '80s, early '90s with the he had like the jazz and the synth backup instruments. I thought Sting was better with that. So you hear a lot of people like that playing rock music today, or like I heard. I think Johnny Hates Jazz has a new album in the past 2 years. It sounds like they're rock. Johnny Hates Jazz had an album like 10 years ago, and they had an album like 2 years ago, or I think it's 1 year ago, and they're trying to be a rock band. Imagine that. Johnny Hates Jazz is trying to be a rock band. But they were never a rock band in the 80s. They were sophistopop. Johnny Hates Jazz was like one of the biggest sophistopop bands, which is basically synth pop, but altered. That's the way I see it. It's like altered synth pop, but it's like sophistopop is like synth pop with more jazz instruments and more saxophone and stuff like that. But it's like a more advanced form of synth pop. I think the only thing better than synth pop is sophistopop. But Johnny Hates Jazz is playing rock. Like they've got total guitars. They don't really have any synths. So like that's a depressing development for Johnny Hates Jazz. Like I always consider them way better than Duran Duran. I thought Johnny Hates Jazz was way better. Like what was their hit song? I don't remember. But what was Johnny Hates Jazz hit song? Hates Jazz. Sorry, I have to do this to give you a proper description. Shattered Dreams. Shattered Dreams was Johnny Hates Jazz hit song. Okay, Shattered Dreams is way better than anything Duran Duran has ever done. Okay, because I think Sophistopop is better than that. Whatever, but the problem is Johnny Hates Jazz is trying to make rock today. They're not. They're like what, 60 years old. They're probably even younger. Well, they're probably like 50 years old. They're probably younger than Duran Duran is. I don't know how old Duran Duran is, but I don't know how old any of these people are. I'm just making up numbers, but the point I'm trying to make is Duran Duran. I mean, Johnny Hates Jazz is trying to play rock music, but that's not what I want from Johnny Hates Jazz. Maybe somebody wants that from them. I want sophistopop or synthpop or something. I don't want rock from Johnny Hates Jazz. I'll listen to Pearl Jam if I want rock, which I rarely ever do want rock. I'm not a rock person, but not usually. I'll listen to Green Day if I want rock, but I don't really listen to Green Day either. But you know what I mean. But like Johnny Hates Jazz is like trying to do rock, but it's like, why don't you just do sophistopop like you did originally? I don't think they know how to do it. I don't even think they enjoy that genre. People like Sting, you hear Sting interviewed, and he's like, oh, that music I made in the late '80s was terrible. It was just terrible, and he disregards all of it because he's like, oh, only the rock music was good with the Police, and he thought his solo work was terrible, and his music he makes today is completely different. Sting is good either way because Sting is so talented that he's good even if he makes rock. But Johnny Hates Jazz is not as good as Sting. That's the problem. Now, Duran Duran, on the other hand, is diving almost more into synth pop than they did in the '80s. They were almost more of a rock band in the '80s who used some synths, and now they're switching more to synth pop to sound more '80s, which is really interesting because like I guess they always use synth, like even in the '90s and the 2000s, but I always thought of them as more of a rock band, but now they're diving more into their synth roots to sound more '80s, which you know you start to think maybe Duran Duran likes '80s music, maybe they like that pigeonhole that they're put in, maybe they appreciate that they they're not out here making rag how do you say it, reggae or reggae. They're like Sting's making reggae albums because Sting's so silly, but it's his reggae album with Shaggy sounded good. It did sound good, but it still sounds silly, you know. Sting's album sounds silly. Um, I mean the album was, I don't know, but it was good. But Duran Duran, Future Past, I really liked it. You should listen to it. I don't do the thing where I do a track by track analysis on these reviews, but there's some songs that were really spectacular that I might have to put on my number one playlist, my biggest playlist that I use on Spotify, because it's such a good it's such a good album. The whole thing. It's like they really want to sound '80s again, which is really cool because a lot of people think they're like too cool for school, like they don't want to sound '80s. And you have people like Tears for Fears, they don't even make any albums anymore. Tears for Fears hasn't made an album in like almost 20 years because is it lack of confidence? I just don't think they would make that much money from it. They probably don't need the money, but I don't know if they need the money, but like they don't really want to be a touring band. They don't really want to be music. Tears for Fears doesn't really want to be musicians. They gave up music like 20 years ago. I think they do other stuff with their lives. But I'm really glad to see Duran Duran. They've always been good, even well past the '80s. They've had hit songs in the '90s and the 2000s. I remember hit songs growing up in the '90s and the 2000s. They'd play on the radio from Duran Duran. That was before I even listened to '80s music. When I was a really little kid, I'd hear that stuff. Um, but they were always an overrated band as far as if you love '80s music like me, like I've always thought 90% of the other '80s music was better than Duran Duran, but I also think Duran Duran is better than anything else outside of '80s music, so I've always thought they were really good. But I've just heard them so many times at gas stations where I used to work. I used to work at Kmart, and they'd say, "Her name is Rio, and she dances on the sand." Oh my God, please don't. If I hear Rio one more time, I hear Hungry Like the Wolf one more time. I like Hungry Like the Wolf. I like Rio. They're good songs. I just don't want to hear them as much as they play them. Um, you know, I like Hungry Like the Wolf. And like there was that one song that was remade by Biggie. What was that song from? Like it was from like '88. There's a Duran song from like 80, 87, 88 that 7 years later it was remade by Biggie. Um, or 5 years later it was remade. Because in the '90s they remade all the '70s and '80s music. Especially the rappers. Was it? I'm not gonna look it up. You could probably figure it out. Whatever. Biggie remade one of, or did a remix or whatever of one of Duran Duran's songs. Yeah, yeah. So obviously they're actually really talented with rhyming. Their rhymes are really good. Whoever's writing, they're really good at writing music. They're really good at writing beats, doing guitar, keyboard. They're good at the whole thing. And I'm not taking anything away from Duran Duran. They're so talented. and I really appreciate they're better now than they were back then. It's funny because like how are they getting so much better when they're so old? Like what are they in their 50s or something and they're this good? Are they in their 40s? I don't know what they are, but like they're better now than they ever were. They're so good. It's surprising how good they are, and they're getting better than ever. And maybe maybe life gets better when you get older if you can keep making good music. I don't know. I'm gonna stop it here because I could go on forever, but it's getting late at night. I don't want to be too loud. Um, but what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, let me know in the comments below. Have you listened to Future Past by Duran Duran? Let me know in the comments below. What do you think of the album? Did you like it? Um, Let me know in the comments below. What do you think of Duran Duran? Please subscribe to this channel and be part of the community. Please like the video. It really helps out the channel a lot. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.